strategy is broken, first slot after lunch, such a topic. I make sure that we run through a few slides so that everybody definitely keeps his or her attention level. So what are the things I want to talk about? First, you just asked, what is strategy? Yes, I want to talk about what strategy actually is. Then, as the whole topic is called Strategy is Broken, I want to share my view on why is it broken. And obviously, if something is broken, we should think about how to fix it. And definitely, I want to share my opinion. Just before I run through those three different agenda topics, few words about myself. So just you know, why am I talking about strategy? I actually worked 5 years in the strategy department of a big corporate at Lufthansa. I then left Lufthansa in order to found the Lufthansa Innovation Hub. So we were building new ventures, and I realized this is something completely different. Like building a startup is completely different than how strategy works in the ivory tower. And then afterwards, I left Lufthansa, joined Hive when we were 6 people, building a new kind of consultancy. Now we are 70 people. And we're working for clients from all different industries and helping them with their strategy topics. So the whole topic of strategy actually sticks with me since more than a decade. So what is strategy? I would say it's a plan on how to achieve your business goals. This is probably the most simple definition you can have. It is your plan on how to achieve your business goals. So if that is the definition, what do you believe, what do you think, how many people in Germany actually have any kind of strategy position? I actually just look it up. If you crawl LinkedIn and just type in who has a position with the name strategy in his or her current role, just shoot a number. What do you think?
Too many.
Too many, yeah, okay. You might be biased. 10% of all employees in Germany? Okay, on LinkedIn. Okay, but that's definitely a huge number. So, any other guesses? Some specific numbers? 0.5%? Let's talk about specific, like FTEs or people in total, so I don't have to make the calculation. 1,000. Who thinks more than 1,000? 20,000. Who thinks more than 20,000? It's like an auction. It's great. The people coming into the room are like, oh shit, what am I buying here? What am I buying? 100,000? More than 100? 150? Okay, at least you're awake. That's good. It's 21,000 and a few. So, yes, you're right, but you didn't want anything. I'm sorry. So, this is pretty much of their traditional toolbox. So, if you work in strategy, most of the time you do some like 2x2 matrices, and then you put in your input in there. You call it SWOT analysis, growth share matrix, balanced scorecard, business model canvas, Porter's 5 forces, etc., etc. This is the toolbox with which strategy managers typically work. Why is this broken? And there are 3 topics where I believe it's really important to understand that the tools I just showed you, they do not work in those circumstances. The first one is we are living in a world of exponential times. This word has been, I would say, over-exaggerated in the last years, but it's very, very important to understand that we as human beings have no gut feeling for exponential developments. All our gut feelings is based on linear developments. I'll give you an example. If I'm sitting in a cave with a steer and I'm trying to hunt down any animal, if that animal moves with a given speed, I try to figure out when to actually throw my spear to hunt this animal down. This is linear development. Anything like Moore's law, actually built by technology, any exponential development has nothing to do with what we have been taught and what we learned as human beings in the last 10,000 years. And I want to give you some very practical example, and then you realize why you have no gut feeling about this topic. So let's assume you have your most important project, your most important business project in your company, and you give yourself 10 years time in order to achieve 100% of that goal. And it doesn't matter if 100% means market domination or revenue of 100 million or billion or whatsoever. It could also be active users, anything. But you give yourself 10 years time, and you just put the best people to work you have in your company. And then you let them work. And you know it's a super tough topic, because that's why you actually give yourself 10 years. And after 3 years, you ask those guys, okay, can I please have a status update? And they say, yeah, we're on track. And you say, what do you mean we're on track? And they say, well, we achieved 1% of the target. This, and just really try to feel it, doesn't feel right. If somebody tells you, it took me 1/3 of the time in order to achieve 1/100 of the actual outcome that just doesn't feel right. So what you learn as a manager, those are lazy guys. You definitely let them run away for 3 years anymore. So next time you check in, it's after 2 more years. So after 5 years, you ask them, okay, guys, girls, what's the status? And they say, we're still on track. We're still on track. Half of the time is over. We achieved 3% of the result. And again, if you look at the curve, it doesn't look like it's hitting that point in time. It doesn't look like this. And this is why we do not have this gut feeling. But if you calculate the numbers, I mean, what is happening, what has been happening in the first 5 years, this number is always doubling. 0.2, 0.4, 0.8, 1.6, 3.2. You don't see it because it's small numbers, but it's actually doubling. And it's pretty obvious what happens, and you can make the calculation yourself. You then see, okay, even after 7 years, it sounds absolutely impossible to take the next 3 years in order to achieve the remaining 88%. Even at that point, and you can do the math, you calculate the numbers and you say, okay, but they will never be able to do like 25, 50, 100. Never. Because obviously those are the numbers. So this is a pure exponential curve. And I show you some real business examples of business models who developed exactly that way. Take a 10-year time frame and just remember, after half of the time, you have 3%, and then you have this. This pretty much looks like such a curve. It's Netflix. So just cut it in half, put it here, and then say, if they would have had the goal of achieving those 280 million, how much would they have achieved after the first half? Pretty much 2 or 3% of that. This is the money being paid out by Apple to its developers. It's an exponential curve. And just remember or assume how their business meeting would have looked like in 2015 when someone said, okay, yes, we are on track because our goal is like 300 billion. It just doesn't feel right. And those curves going on and on. Amazon Web Service, NVIDIA was the one I just showed. So it's very, very important that if you have small numbers and they develop, we always tend to underestimate the development of small numbers. Because if you remember the first half of the curve from the distance, it looks all the same. 0.2 looks exactly like 0.4, like 0.8, like 1.6. But then on an exponential curve, it's called the inflection point. So if such a curve takes off, most of the time it's too late. Most of the time when you realize, okay, there is a competitor that was small 5 years ago, small 4 years ago, small 3 years ago, small last year, okay, something is happening now. If that competitor is growing exponentially, the moment you realize that they are onto something, they overtake you after 1 year. If they made it to grow and double 5 years in a row, why shouldn't they grow and double also in the 6th and 7th and 8th year? So this is topic 1, where I believe that the typical strategy toolbox doesn't really help because it can't cope with those developments. Second one is the way of your competitions look like. What do you think is the competitor of Netflix? The most important competitor? TikTok. YouTube. Ah, you read the interview. You said sleep. This is what he said as well. And if you read the interview, interestingly, he said he believes Netflix is currently winning against sleep. And it's kind of true, and I think typical 2x2 matrices will not lead to that answer. They might have led to all the other answers you just gave and even more other companies. But to realize that you're even competing out of your category and that Netflix is actually competing with sleep, I think it's at least it's a very interesting perspective. And this leads to finding that I really believe if you look at what your pure competitors are doing, it's like driving a car on a highway looking into the back mirror, which means if nothing changes, you have a pretty clear understanding of what's happening in front of you just by looking at what's behind you. The thing is, if the highway makes a sharp turn, the moment you realize that you're actually turning, you might hit whatever is next to the highway. So looking at your pure competition doesn't really help you to move forward. There's some other part what we recommend how to look at and what to look at, but just by looking at the core competition, really have this picture in mind. It's like driving on the highway and just looking in the back mirror. So this is the second topic. As I said, I really believe typical strategy work does not work because you have competitors which you cannot put in those boxes in your toolbox. And then the third development is that we're living in a world, probably most of you know the phrase that software is eating the world. That was like, I think, generated 10 years ago, and it just says that a lot of business models are actually disrupted by software. What we see now, and we see it in so many B2B industries, that there's something like outcome-based business models or everything as a service. And I want to share my perspective why this is especially relevant in Germany. Because I believe, and this is probably for the first time in history, that the phrase made in Germany is at the risk of being completely commoditized. And just by theory, if you, is that working? Oh, okay, if you're at where the question mark is, at that part of the curve, so if your market penetration is on a declining curve, there are a few strategic options you have. You could improve the product, which is pretty hard with most of the industrial B2B products we build. To just gain a bit more efficiency, it is hard to do. The second is, you could change the business model. The thing is, in established B2B industries, again, it's hard to change the business model because this is more or less set in stone. So what we currently see is a combination that people really change the playground they are competing with. And I give you a few examples what I mean with that. All those companies, all those logos you see up there, decided to offer their heavy B2B product as a service, not as a product anymore. And I give you one example. It's a client we work with is Trumpf. We had their managing director on our podcast, and he was sharing very, very openly all the learnings about what they did there. So that's why I can also share them here on stage. In the past, they sold a machinery which enables you to laser parts. And such a machine costs 1.something million. And then they had the idea, what if we offer our clients not the machine, but the ability to laser those metal parts, those metal sheets, if we offer them the ability. And then we say they charge, or we charge them, they pay us just, let's say, €2 per metal piece, instead of buying a machine for 1.something million. And they said, if they do so, it's completely disruptive within the company, because it means you do not have the cash flow required from your CFO, you do not have the sales, which your salespeople normally are hunting in, because you offer it in a completely different way. But it also means you need all the data to understand what is actually happening with that machinery. And this model, the paper part, as it's mentioned by Trumpf, is just one example, and we see it in all those industries. And to put it on one equation, I really believe in the past it was about offer a product. Whether it is a software, a machine, whatsoever. You offer a product, you put it down there on the shelf and say, this is a product, this is a price. Because all those industries, they get so much interconnected, it's not about offering products anymore. It is about offering the ability to your clients, give them the ability to accomplish something. You have to ask yourself, what are the processes, because we all know so much about our own products, what are the processes of my clients which I can actually integrate in order to allow them to accomplish something. And this is such a huge trend, what will lead, again, to a merge of completely different industries. And again, this is the third reason why I believe that the typical strategy toolbox is broken. So that was status quo and why it's broken, and now I want to share my view on how to fix it. The first one is you really have to integrate data. And I give you one precise example. When we work with our clients, we always tend to look at startup and venture capital. And we always get the question why we do this. All our clients come to say, why are you so obsessed of looking at venture capital flows and then funding startups? And it's pretty straightforward. We believe that every time someone decides to found a company, this person, at least they would have had 99 different ideas where they decide not to pursue them. So having great ideas and then deciding to bet your lifetime on it to execute these ideas is a scarce resource. And the other one, every investor obviously have many options to deploy their money into different startups. So if they decide that they invest in startup A, they should have taken at least 99 other decisions where they say, okay, we do not invest into those companies. So by tracking those two scarce resources, founding time or founder's time and venture capital flow, it's pretty interesting to see how markets move. And what we can observe in pretty every market, that is, for a couple of years, the number of new startups in a given market and the amount of venture capital goes in parallel, which just means, okay, this is a hot market. Founders are betting their lifetime, VCs are betting their money. What always happens, always, is that the founding curve declines before the funding curve. Why? It's pretty obvious, because if you have any kind of market saturation, any bets on, okay, there might be a proven winner, then founders decide to not enter the market anymore, but money is obviously needed for the Series D, Series E, or whatever. So money stays, but new founding declines. And this is the most interesting part where the actual market, the actual revenue which can be earned, takes off. And this is just a very easy example. We look at markets in very detailed description. This is the easiest way to explain it. But just by looking into those numbers, you can read markets in a completely different way. And there's so much more data out there. Whenever we look at the market, we observe every media every mentioning of those topics in the media we can actually see. So we have built a crawler which is crawling the worldwide biggest 300 tech media in order to understand how different trends are actually talked about in the media. Secondly, talking about data, we once had a client who asked himself, what is Amazon doing in that specific industry? And then obviously you can read reports or look into the media, but managers from Amazon obviously do not talk about their strategy plans in the media. So we asked ourselves, how can I assess data in order to get a feeling of what Amazon is up to? And we decided to globally decode the Amazon job listings. Because we said, if we go back the last 20 years and look on what were the jobs postings from Amazon before they actually launched Amazon Web Services. What kind of people were they looking for? Because if you scale at a big tech company at this scale, you cannot hide it from the public. There will be any data point. And sometimes it's a startup, sometimes it's capital, sometimes it's M&A activity, sometimes it's job posting. So the data is out there, but again, it's not data which fits in the usual toolbox. And so this kind of brings a few things together that we always say you don't have to monitor your competitors, you really have to look at your whole ecosystem. And I give you one example. I just Googled housing market, and this graph comes up. So if you Google housing market, this is something I found in the internet. It's a typical comparison of 10 different companies on one different metrics. And there it's, or is it the households, number of residential units. And this is most of the time how typically people look at their companies. They compare themselves with their competitors. We also did an analysis on the housing market, and we found 6,200 startups in there and said, okay, wow, what are they doing? What are the actual markets? How can you cluster them? What is home consumption versus household services, the energy management, smart grid monitoring versus road to net negative? You can read all those things, but it's a completely different way if you say this is housing market or this is a housing market. And this is why I would say this is traditional competitor monitoring, this is the ecosystem monitoring. So this is the second topic, how to fix this. And then the third is continuous strategy. And with continuous strategy comes that truth, and I'm saying that as a consultant, as a manager, but in order to create more and more certainty, this comes not with more Excel, with more PowerPoint, it's something different you need. It is really real validation. And I tell you what that means. And most of the people run something where they say, okay, we do a strategy plan, we implement it, and then we monitor how it's implemented. We do a gap analysis of the business plan, the reality, and so on and so on. But it's pretty statical. And I believe the same as we have it in like venture building, where you have the build, measure, learn cycle, this somehow is also true for strategy. Because what you should do, in my opinion, is you should make a plan, yes. But after you have the plan, don't just implement your plan. Write down what are the hypotheses you build your plan on and significantly validate those hypotheses, also with strategy work. Because then if you validate this, you see on the market if you're true or not, if it's validated or falsified. And then you can actually build and measure and learn and adjust your plan again. But most of the big corporates, they do like strategy projects every 3 years. And I think this is pretty much useless in a time which in an environment which changes so quickly. So my takeaway before we jump into the panel discussion is those are the 3 things why I believe strategy is broken. I've shown you all the first is the exponential developments, at least of digital business model. The second, the way the competition is similar, just remember the sleep example. And the third, everything as a service, you see it in every kind of industry. And how to fix it, and obviously this is not a compelling list and it's not full, but those are 3 things where I believe that it really works, is ask yourself in strategy work, where is the data point and not what is my gut feeling. You really have to integrate data, and there is so much data out there. Second, as I showed you, do the ecosystem landscaping, really ask yourself what is the broader environment we're working on and not what is my competitor doing, and then redefine your strategy process. And if you help with that, just give me a shout, and then I think I'm done, and as I understood correctly, Simon, we're starting the panel straight away, right? Thanks for your attention.